Setup of my colloidal silver generator and what I've learnt so far. So what you need is some kind of power supply. In this case I've used a Fujitsu power supply there, and that's about 20 volts DC, so it converts AC mains into direct current, which is the same as what is on a battery that you plug into anything. So like a battery is what's known as direct current. So what comes out of that is direct current, and I've got an adapter on there because I didn't want to waste that connector, and I just put a adapter connector in there, so that then goes all the way to my connector on here, which is just there, and then that goes into two crocodile clips, and then that is just a connection block which just keeps that anchored in place, and in this case the bubbler. So that's a fish tank bubbler there. All that really does is it stirs the water. Now you'll notice that it says on here distilled water. I've used a distilled water creator. It's really just a cloud. It's a cloud condensation maker, otherwise known as a still. So if you measure the parts per million of what it is after it's been had all the particles removed, it gets down to about 3 parts per million, roughly, sometimes 4. And if I just get some tap water here, you'll notice it goes off the scale. It's just not a number that it can happily. It's in the over 999 parts per million, so that's just ordinary tap water that looks clear, but it's highly polluted. So when I measured earlier, you notice it said 3.4 parts per million. So I've had this colloidal silver being running for about a couple of hours now, and I'm going to estimate it's going to be around about 10 parts per million. So, oh, it's even better than I thought. I think that's 15. And now when I subtract the 4, obviously that's around about that area, yeah, depending on what mood it's in, the sensor and the heat, because it's coming from, there's some steam coming up, so it changes the calibration of the sensor. But you can roughly say there's about 10 parts per million after you subtract the quantity that was in the original distilled water. So by the time, so now there's 10 parts per million of extra colloidal silver. The longer you leave that in there for, the better. Now you probably might be wondering, what's that bubbling sound? That's coming from my stove, of course, and I've got some water that after displacement comes to about that height, and I've got some water in here which is starting to run out, which I'm going to have to refill soon. So I keep that boiling, and what that does is it heats this up without cracking the jar, and you just put some water in the bottom. That needs to be about there. It's evaporated now, so as you can see that's the kind of water line, so it's nearly evaporated. So that just keeps this water really nice and hot. Okay, I haven't measured the temperature that it's supposed to be, but or what it ever is, but I suspect it's bloody high. So I will just test that for myself. temperature, I think that's 40, 50 degrees. Yep, around about 50 degrees. Yeah. Hopefully. Yeah, it's going down in temperature now, yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So you'll notice I use Hanna instruments, because these are just the quality ones. You can buy rubbish ones elsewhere which you get very inaccurate, and the one that I showed you that measured the water is this model here, made by Hanna Instruments. They make them in ones that have sort of what you can measure the quality of tap water if you wanted to, but I mean I am to know that it's very, very highly polluted everywhere, but ideally you want something that measures it in parts per million, micro S, but that's mainly the model number that you want, and you can calibrate these as well. So just to summarise, that's the setup that I have. Now, a lot of people will be thinking to themselves, well, how do I know that I'm generating a colloidal silver? Well, first of all, good idea to not have it stirring initially. So you remove the bubbler, or you switch off the bubbler, and it's no longer stirring. So you need to have a nice clear bit of the jar showing, and what you need is one of these, a torch, but not just any torch, a torch that you can change from wide angle to zoom into a high point. This particular one is takes a 18650 battery. Now, if you put the light to the back, and I'll show you what that looks like from above. Roughly about 1 o'clock position from behind, you'll get this refraction, or not refraction or reflection at a particular angle. These are what known as wisps of, these micro wisps of, there they are. You can see them if I hold the camera very still. There they go. So they are making connection through the water to the other side, to the other connection. Of course, you don't really want that making large particles, so what you need to do is keep the water temperature to about 50 degrees and make sure you continue stirring it. And I'm going to switch the bubbler on so that now all those particles, now what you'll notice is that all those are bubble particles, they're not dirt. You'll notice that there's a sort of a slightly grey look to it. Now, I'll show you in some pre-made colloidal silver water, and it only shows up when you shine one of these lights on it. Look, if I take the light away, you won't see it. If I do it here, you will. Right? It can only be seen in a certain light. And some of it's coming from the glass to some extent, as you can see, but the vast majority is coming from the water. and you can only see it if you put it at a certain angle. And that's all mixed in with all the water. And as I say, it should look clear to the naked eye. If to the naked eye it looks grey, you've got too large particles of colloidal silver. So don't listen to people who say you need to add salt to the process, because that is what causes the large clumps of colloidal silver, and they are too large to have any effect on your body, other than if you keep consuming that quantity over time will eventually make your skin go grey, but it would take probably at least a year to 2 years of consuming it. So by then you will have realised that you need to make sure that the water is always clear looking when you drink it, and do not put salt in it. So there we go. Now let's just measure again, just as a matter of interest. Let's measure the, without burning myself, that was a youch. Switch that on. Let's switch that on. God, it's difficult to see on the camera that, so it's showing, yes, showing about 15 parts per million on that. So there you go. Hopefully that's pretty much it. And then obviously decant it into bottles, and if you're concerned about getting some extra clumps of silver, then run it through a fine coffee filter into a funnel, and then decant it into a jar. Now I would recommend that you use a green wine bottle if you do not keep the bottles in if you keep the bottles in sunlight, and the reason for that is that sunlight degrades the silver. So it's okay to put it in a clear bottle, but you need to then keep that bottle in a darkened area away from sunlight. I'm not too sure if it is affected by electrical lights, but I would just err on the cautious side and try to put your colloidal silver into green wine bottles. They make them green to stop the wine from going off under sunlight. So any green bottle will work.